so important when we are growing up, when we go through school, college, that there should be that search. It's almost a duty. Duty of the person, duty of the parent, duty of the teacher, to help find a passion in a human being. And how do you find that passion? Well, one way is the way we began a little while ago, when I suggested that you think of what you might do if you had only 3 months to live. If you had 3 months to live, you wouldn't do an MBA, that's for sure. And so you would turn to what I call making a life. And making a life, what's the point of trying to reinvent the wheel when hundreds and thousands of people have already asked that question and written wonderful books about that? And so it is really the idea that no matter what we study in school, college, reading is such an important source because it gives the experience of others that we can imbibe. Now, I guess I was lucky. I went as an undergraduate to a college in America, and like the son of a good middle-class Indian family, I said I would do what my father did. He was an engineer, but I went to study engineering. But when I arrived at the college, this was Harvard, they said, "You've come to the wrong college if you want to study engineering. There's another one called MIT, which is nearby. So why don't you change over?" Anyway, I wasn't deterred, but I discovered in the very first year a course in chemistry, and I loved it. And so I said, I asked, can I change my major? So I switched to chemistry. That summer I came home after the first year, and for the first time I saw poverty in India. You know, you really only discover poverty when you go away. And so I came back and I said I must study economics. So in my second year, I changed again and started doing economics. After studying economics, I suddenly discovered history and literature, and I wavered about changing to those. And then I discovered the beauty of buildings. And so I said I'll be an architect. And I read a lot of books on buildings and art and so on. So suddenly I switched again to architecture. And in my third year, towards the middle of the third year, I discovered philosophy and Sanskrit. Believe it or not, there was a great scholar of Sanskrit. I took philosophy and I took Sanskrit. But Sanskrit was very difficult. So I stayed with philosophy, but after a year I left Sanskrit. And I finally graduated in philosophy. So that's how you were able to introduce me as someone who studied philosophy. The point of this whole exercise is that today when I have become a writer, I go back to those roots of the studies that I did in college, where I had made, without realizing it, I had been making a life. Somebody who studies philosophy is not making a living, that's for sure. And so I feel that that's the kind of education that we should have, that we should have a broad-based humanities education that is available to lucky undergraduates in America. But even if we don't have that kind of education system, now, there's a program on, you can just Google Great Books program. And there are 100 books that will come up. And there are universities that teach only these 100 books in 4 years. And everyone at any age can start reading these 100 books. And online, you can actually get commentaries, you can get lectures, and so you can listen and you can educate yourself into making a life, and anybody can do it, whether you are living in Bareilly or whether you are living in Tuticorin. So as a result, because I had this idea of making a life, and I was able to acquire it early, in my 20s and 30s, while I was working for my company, I became a weekend writer. And so while my friends in the corporate world played golf, on weekends I wrote. And so I wore two hats right through my life. And from a weekend writer in the 20s and 30s and 40s, I was too busy running my company. But 20s and 30s, I was able to write 3 plays, Larinsa, Jaku Hill, and Mira, in my 20s. And I wrote a novel called The Fine Family in my 30s. Now, it took me 9 years to write a novel as a weekend writer, but as a weekday writer, it would have taken 2 to 3 years. So, when I got to 50 and I asked this existential question, and my wife dismissed it, I told her I was serious. And so I had to persuade her, and we had to sat down and did some arithmetic. How much savings did we have? How much money would we need to live with without having a job? And fortunately, our children were grown up. They had gone to college. And so some of the responsibilities were taken care of. And so I persuaded her that this was time to leave at the age of 50 to become a full-time writer. But it was almost like a no-brainer that this was something that I had found a passion, and I was ready to pursue it. So what is it that I have learned in the last 20 years as a writer, full-time, not having to go to office, and being able to do what I wanted to do? Very little, I'm afraid. And that is really the modest truth. But there are a few ideas that I might share with you. One is that when you enjoy doing something, then it doesn't feel like work. And so for the last 20 years, my routine has been that I'm on my desk at 6 o'clock in the morning in my pajamas, pajama kurta, and I write flat out till 12 to 1 o'clock. In between, I have some chai, a little breakfast, but that's on the table. I resist the temptation in the morning to read the newspaper. Never read the newspaper in the morning. Very disturbing sometimes. Secondly, don't answer phone calls in the morning. Third, don't do email in the morning. Fourth, don't look at your bills in the morning. All that is afternoon activity when you've had lunch and you're feeling reasonably contented. So the thing I find is that when you're doing what you want to do, then time gets distorted. Sometimes I'll get up. Usually I try to work till 12, and then I come to Delhi Gymkhana swimming pool and have a swim. But sometimes I forget, and I suddenly say, oh my God, it's 1 o'clock. So if you're involved with something, you're absorbed by something, time gets distorted and you say, oh my God, means you've lost some hours. And those hours that you've lost is what athletes call being in the zone. You know, they asked Tendulkar when he was nearing his double century a few years ago, they said, how did it feel when you were nearing your double century? And he says, you know, I wasn't even aware of myself, because by then the ball had grown so big and the bat had grown so big that the bat was hitting the ball on its own. I wasn't even aware that I was hitting it. So that's the process is self-forgetting, that you have forgotten who you are, time has got distorted, and you are in this thing called the zone. Self-forgetting, of course, is a religious idea in Buddhism, in Zen Buddhism, as well as in many yogic philosophies. The second lesson that I have learned is to try and live in the present. Our temptation as human beings is to live in the future, and sometimes to live in the past. But we almost never. The present is so fleeting that before we know it, it's past. And this is why Seneca, the Roman writer, says that life happens when we are making plans. And so while we make our plans, life is going by. And then we are always making plans. And then we get old, and then we are looking back at our plans. And so it's a very hard thing to do. But to try to create meaning in the moment of the present is a lesson that I could certainly, it's something that I aspire to, but usually do not succeed. The third thought is that if you are making a conscious effort to live in the present, try to record what you are doing. In other words, after maybe you've been doing things in the morning, take an hour in the afternoon and actually put down what you thought, what you saw, and little things. Maybe the color of the towel in the bathroom, or the curtains in your house, somebody you could talk to. These don't have to be profound things. What you're doing is recording the present. And slowly you'll find that as you record the present, your thoughts will get more and more profound. And suddenly you'll say, aha, now that's a good idea. And so the fact is we are essentially a collection of moments. And the self that we identify with is an illusion. It's just a narrative. And the scientists have not found it, and the religions have not found it, that sort of self. So we create ourselves. And so, and then the other thought about it, the past, is that in some ways, when we are recording the past, we have the luxury to interpret it also. Because when we are living in the present, suddenly everything is happening at the same time. And we are confused. You know, there's a car going, there's a plane, there's a bird, there are trees, somebody is talking to us. What do you pay attention to? Everything is happening at the same time. But when you're recording, then you can do it one at a time. And just remember, and that makes for a much more talking about a meaningful life, that I feel helps us. So, here are some thoughts about living a life, making a life, a non-religious answer to making a life. Of course, if you are religious and you're lucky, you've found faith in life, then you're blessed, you have a spiritual progress, and you are on to doing what is our classical tradition in India calls the greatest aim of life, which is our project, a spiritual project of liberation from the human condition. An idea that comes from the Upanishads but is repeated again and again. Thank you.
We'll take on questions now from the audience. Jagdish?
First of all, in the lighter vein, the answer, the thought which came to my mind when you said if you have 3 months to live, I would say never go to a doctor. That's in a lighter vein for the rest of your life. And now to the serious matters, sir, which you have spoken so well about, the life and living. And I think most of us are only living, as you correctly implied also, and very few people make a good life or succeed in having a good life, because life, in my opinion, has two important points of conflicting points in a way. There are two different sides of the coin, and it is very difficult to match and marry the two conflicting sides of the coin. One is your working life, where you are totally absorbed, sometimes not with as much passion as you had. You are of course a total exception to all that I am saying. And the other is your family life, which you want to also make a success. It seems very difficult for ordinary mortals like us to make a success of both sides of the coin and how to get them on. So I don't know how to find a solution to that kind of a problem, and I think many of us do not find a solution to that problem, and that's why we are ordinary mortals. So any tips on that, I would be grateful.
Well, that's a profound question that you've raised. And by the way, I hope some of you will talk about the thought game, and I would like to know how you would like to live those last 3 months. That would be an interesting thing for me. But you've talked about the classical conflict between work and family, between and then the answer, of course, you have to love both, and you have to be able to be able to achieve both. What helps in this conflict is what Freud said. Freud said, if you love both, the family, the person you live with, as well as the work you do, you are actually a very much more positive person. If you hate your work or you hate the person you live with, you're not a very happy person. So the starting point is that it would seem to me that the starting point is to like the work you do, and at least if you don't love it, you must face. And he had a very routine job, but he had a tremendous ability to make every work he did into a bit of a game, which he would enjoy. He would tell you that, and then he says, well, this came to work. At lunchtime, he would tell us the game he had played with himself, which had helped him in this process.
Hello. I don't know whether I'm qualified in this August gathering to say so or not, but maybe Buddha's middle path is the best. This way and that way both. Don't take too much extreme on one side or on the other. Any other questions, please? Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Thank you. I did think of the last 3 months of my life and felt that at this age we are pretty much doing what we like. So we qualify for the happiness model. But my question to you is, shouldn't this be given more to school and college-going students and freshly graduated youngsters? Because they're the ones that need to know how to make that choice. We, by and large, in this audience are doing exactly what we'd like to do.
Well, I think it's our